Subheads. There is far too much Luminary slander and I need to correct it. I have read horror stories of how Luminary is just terrible, a massive bait, is not a good starter, and just not even worth being in Ascendancy. I disagree with all of those claims. I consider Luminary to be actually an amazing starter, as long as you build it correctly. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to build Luminary, right side, and also a secret Luminary tech I found at the end. The common theme I found among all Luminary detractors is they all exclusively went left side with link investment. Now this build can be good, but requires a lot of overhead knowledge. More than just how to build, it's how to gear, how to get mercs, how to scale power. It tests a lot, and the only players that are really able to do that naturally are people that either play a lot or they play SSF exclusively. The biggest test is the ability to read, as some mercs can have brutality as a support gem. It's Avatar Fire and a series Promise meme all over again. Just now, about a week and a half, 2 into the league, people are now starting to see these builds really pop off. But we're not here to talk about that. If you want to hear more about the link builds, look at all of the other Luminary guides. For some reason, there's almost no discussion about the right side of the Luminary tree. Not only is this side far more accessible to most players, I think it's incredibly strong and slept on. First node, Loyal Bodyguard. Mercenaries take 20% of damage from hits for you. This is just 20% less damage taken. Mercs are very tanky and can only really die in extreme situations. As long as your Merc is at level and res capped, it is for the most part immortal. For this character, the Merc only dies twice after reaching max level and being res capped. Once to a very juiced abyss, and second, they drowned in the ocean. Note that is based on life amount, not percentage, so it should always be active in CI builds and possibly never if you're stacking health. Mercs, from what I've seen on average, have around 4.5k health. The next node, Bestowed Knighthood. Mercenaries taunt and have 50% aura effect. Now, taunt is a debuff that hasn't really been relevant till now, as it applies to 10% less damage done to untaunted targets, so in this case you. So in total it comes out to about 28% less damage taken as a baseline. And having the enemies just not target you is actually quite useful for defenses. And also 50 aura effect is actually quite a lot. If we look at Champion, his inspirational node gives 35% aura effect if you include the travel node. In fact, the entire right side of the Luminary tree closely matches Champion in power. Champion's Fortitude makes him have max Fortify at all times. They also often take the 6 max Fortify on the tree, so a baseline of 26% less damage at all times. While champions often stack Fortify to scale it further, a lot do just pick him for his baseline defenses. So point for point, right side Luminary is almost exactly the same as baseline champion. So what, we're a budget champion with an extra aura? How is that worth an ascendancy? And to answer that question, we need to talk about opportunity cost. When you reserve mana for an aura, that is mana that can't be reserved for other auras. You could invest in reservation efficiency, but now that also costs skill points. Plus the sockets to put the gems in and possibly gear to get more reservation efficiency. And it's not just auras, it's gems, it's gear, it's anything you can invest in. Choosing to invest in something means you can't invest that for others. What Luminary does at its core is let you put some of that opportunity cost onto a Merc, allowing you to take things you couldn't before. A lot of auras never saw any use because there was always a higher priority, like getting a defensive aura or your core damage aura up. Now that we can offload 1 or 2 of those onto a Merc, those previously useless reservations are now on the table again. And it's not just a free aura, it is a massively boosted aura. I went to PoB Ninja and I copied the PoB of the top listed aura bot. They were running every single defensive aura at 259% increased effect. Now here's my mercenary from my starter, which was Fizdot. The entire point of this Merc is to be a pride bot, and their pride effect is 254%, which turns out to be about 99% more physical damage taken at max pride effect. More than just affording the reservation of pride, it takes the best aura bot their whole character to hit this amount of aura effect, and we're getting it for effectively free. Also, apparently the Merc's auras and skills are sometimes better than the ones we get. No way of knowing exactly, so I just assumed level 20 gems, even though it's probably better. This is without good gear. I only played my starter for 3 days before I completely funded my strength stacker. Everything on this character except for probably the body armor is less than a few chaos. The Eater Implicit Aura effect while near Pinnacle Boss is the big mod here. For some reason you are considered a Pinnacle Boss, so these mods are always in effect on Mercs. I got this for 30C, but only because I had it on live search during league start. Right now they could be as high as a div. The only reason these are expensive is because no one knows they are worth anything and don't list them. 30% pride effect on a corrupted amulet, no other stats matter. This can go higher with an anoint, but I didn't bother. Gloves are 1C corrupted gloves for vuln on hit, and helmet is elder influenced with nearby enemies taking increased physical damage. None of this gear is rolled, and no other stats matter. No uniques, just mostly vendor trash with one mod on them. Not used here, but offensive caster auras have aura effect on influenced caster weapons. 40% on one hand and 60% on two-handers. So those auras can go up even further. An insanely boosted pride aura, automated albeit weak cursing, as well as doing some of its own damage, which I'm not accounting for at all. All of this without adding any pressure to my skill tree or resources. This is why I think Luminary is actually a fantastic starter. Fizzdot in particular was a good example because it doesn't have that many ways to scale it. Now to be fair, my version of Fizzdot is a lot weaker than Elementalist, but what isn't weaker than Elementalist right now? And the gear was much cheaper. Builds that work for full right side Luminary is anything that would either want one aura that's really good or access to multiple high cost auras. By the way to add Mercs to PoB is to create a new character, add all the gear and relevant skills. If you care about their stats, copy everything from their in-game passive stat page to custom modifiers. This is their simulated passive tree. Make sure to configure everything checked that they do. Go to Import Export, click Build Sharing at the bottom and check Export Support, generate a code, and then click Share to shorten the code and then copy it. Make sure to save this Merc build as well for further editing. Now go back to your build, select the Party tab, paste the code in the box, and now the Merc is in your party. Unfortunately, you can't fine-tune them once they're imported, so you have to go back to your Mercs build and regenerate the code if you change anything, and then re-import it. Now back to Merc tech, you aren't stuck with just aura scaling. You can scale other utilities, like Mercs for instance, and that's what I did on my second Luminary build, Ignite Explosive Concoction. The star of the show is Flame Quiver's Alchemist Mark. Alchemist Mark is a mark that grants flash charges on hit as well as creates burning and poison ground based on the strength of applied ignites or poisons. By scaling mark effect, both the charge gain as well as the strength of ground effects are boosted. This totals to 268% mark effect. Every source of it is on the screen now. Even if a Deadeye took the mark ascendancy and all the mark effect on the tree, they wouldn't even get half this much. Flame Quiver also has a flammability aura, which is slightly boosted by a curse effect. The Merc is wearing Anathema, so that both the mark and curse can be up at the same time. We're also getting a 180% effect Grace, which is higher than what most builds would have. This is power that no other character could have had without dedicating their entire tree to, and we're getting it as a bonus side character. Now there is a problem with this though. With auras, the Merc just has to exist near you, but with Mercs they have to cast the skill. And the Mercs sometimes just don't want to use their skills. They'll just stand there shooting the boss and refuse to cast it at all. Sometimes it's slightly delayed, but I had pinnacle boss fights where they just didn't use the mark at all. So while it's an extremely strong mark, it is not consistent. This strong Alchemist mark felt like a great time to try out Explosive Concoction. I've been wanting to play this for a while and no one else has. Explosive Concoction is a flask skill that consumes charges from Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz flasks to do damage in an area. Sapphire and Topaz flasks add flat elemental damage, while Ruby adds Ignite multiplier. This skill has a lot of fundamental problems. For one, it's a flask skill, so you can't use a main hand weapon. It also uses up your utility flasks, so you need to sustain charges while not being able to use them. Also, adding extra projectiles consumes more flasks per projectile. This skill does shotgun, so you want more projectiles for hit damage, but this makes the charge economy impossible. Also, the flask effects don't really synergize innately, two adding cold and lightning damage while the other being ignite based. We get around this by going Ignite with a source of all damage can ignite. Venarius' Astrolabe Amulet gives Elemental Conflux and +3 to Elemental Gems if you have one of each influence type. Elemental Conflux makes all damage chill, ignite, and shock. This amulet is surprisingly cheap, and I haven't really seen anyone else use it. It's not really that hard to get one of each influence, and I find it a lot easier to set up than something like Leadership's Price. 2 influences come from my double influenced Frenzy, Relic, Caches, and Patience. There are surprisingly a lot of them on trade. 2 from a Hunter Warlord Glove for Fire Dot multi and Frenzy charges. And my last 2 are on my 3rd ring, giving me basic resistances. Today on Creative Use of Game Mechanics, you can consume charges from disabled flasks. The Nameless Bloodline gives you a 3rd ring in exchange for disabling your utility flasks. We weren't going to use them anyway, so this is mostly free. We do lose 1 flask slot that could have been usable, but there's nothing wrong with using 2 life flasks. Now this looks like a bug, but it's been in game since Bloodlines were added, so let's just call it a feature. The utility flasks in question are rolled and enkindled for charge recovery. We are only using one projectile because it's Ignite, so the charges from Alchemist Mark are more than enough to sustain us. Technically not infinite sustain, but nothing's going to outlast them. Explosive Concoction really wants gem levels, and there's no better time to use Skin of the Lords. Skin of the Lords grants +2 socketed gems and a keystone in exchange for being unable to recolor the item. This used to be a major downside, but with the gem socket rework, this is mostly free power. The keystone I use the Elemental Overload. We only have about 9% crit chance, but that's more than enough to proc it. The +2 gems in this item also apply to support gems, mainly in power, giving even more gem levels. After all the gem level bonuses, we end up with a level 31 gem. Since Grace is taken care of by the Merc, we actually have a lot of mana open, and I decided to use it for Tempest, Shield, and Aspect of Solaris. Aspect of Solaris is a new aspect from the Link mechanic, and it grants fire exposure aura around you, and has a stacking exposure effect. It's not in PoB yet, so I'm using custom mods to simulate it. We can't get the full effect without duration scaling, so I'm only going to assume we have 3 stacks, but even then that's still a +25 exposure. Forbidden's our Elementalist for more exposure. Elementalist also gives a Golem, and I found a new way to automate Golems on a non-Elementalist by using Battle Mage's Cry. This will trigger supported skills when an attack is exerted, and shield charge can be exerted. Runegraft with the Bellows is used as our only source of Warcry speed to make it not annoying. Even then, I still forget to use it. I also wanted to try out the new Drauggr's Lantern unique shield. This was added in a patch. This creates Draugr flames when you ignite, doing a portion of the ignite damage around you. This is effectively Fire Plague Bearer. It doesn't feel bad, but does ignite really need it? There's already a ton of ways to spread or prolif ignite. I tried swapping around with Barrack's Respite Ring and it's mostly comparable. Without Explosion's Respite really wasn't chaining, but it was clearing packs at a distance. Draugr Flames on the other hand, you have to walk into it. Depends mostly on playstyle of what you want, they both work. Draugr Flame is also the Vestigial mod on the shield, so you could gamble a bit to see if you can get it on a better base. I tried a few times and got nothing special. I think this shield would be a lot better on a Chieftain who could Snapshot and Explode Ignite. The only other unique is Diet Dawn, the go-to boat for igniting attacks. You would think Analysis Light would work, and it does on paper, but there are issues with generating charges. The usual go-to of Mark Mastery only works when you attack your marked target, but this isn't your mark. If I could find a way to upkeep charges, this would be better, but I couldn't. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that my Merc is using a Polaric Devastation Ring to apply Covered in Ash for us. Damage-wise, it's about 7.7 million from Ignite and 5.4 million from the Burning Ground. The damage is inconsistent as we need to both proc Elemental Overload, and that can take a while for crit, as well as having the Merc actually mark the target. When it works, it just sometimes doesn't. Since Skin of the Lords gives global defenses, I wanted to do ES Evasion Hybrid. I ended up going for Corrupted Soul along with Ghost Dance. This is a good pairing on paper, but I find it annoying in practice. Because the ES recovers immediately after being hit, it feels like only your health is taking the damage and the ES is doing nothing, even though it is doing something. Even then, this was very squishy. The lack of flasks means I can't use them to patch up defenses like I usually would, and I'm reliant heavily on evasion and block. Also, the build just doesn't feel that great, mainly due to Explosive Concoction. It's ground targeted with a slow projectile speed, so the damage and leech is delayed. Plus it's easier to just miss on a fast moving target. Also, Ignite in general just doesn't feel that good. Since enemies avoid ailments as a map mod, I can't just Alch and go. I have bricked multiple charts from this. The last thing I want to do while playing is read or set up a regex. Anyway, I'm giving it 6 out of 10. Explosive Concoction has too many inherent flaws and not that much gain. I gave it ample amounts of everything it needs, fixed all its problems, and it only comes out to okay. Consuming disabled flasks, while novel, really isn't doing that much. Maybe if it would be better if we had Shrine Belt still. Merc scaling Mercs are very good on paper numbers, but the execution has issues. Until the Merc AI improves or we have a priority system, I would keep builds to auras or mechanics with as few moving parts as possible. It does work, it's just painfully inconsistent. I also want to retcon my previous strength stacker to an 8 out of 10. I seem to have forgotten what a true 6 out of 10 feels like. And that's about all for this one, except not really. It's time for the hidden Merc tech I found out. I was theorizing this since Luminary was teased, and once I got in game, it actually works out pretty well. Sharing charges is a mechanic found on Conduit, Supreme Grandstanding, and the Link Mastery. Sharing specifically means if a valid target gains a charge, you also gain a charge. It doesn't care about existing charges, just the generation of them. Conduit only affects party members, which the Mercs are no longer, so that won't work, but the other two will. Tofal Wand has the lines, lose all power charges on reaching maximum charges, and gain a frenzy charge on reaching maximum power charges. By giving your Merc +2 minimum power charges from a Shaper Shield, and using a Ramirez Banquet Ring for power charge on non-crit, every single hit by your Merc will generate a power charge, which they will lose it and then gain a frenzy charge. This can be further expanded by the unique amulet Evolve's Devotion, which gives an endurance charge when you lose a power charge. The unique helmet Cadigan's Crown prevents critical hits, so this could be used for more consistency. And there you go, a walking charge battery. In the clip, I have discharge linked with intuitive link, so the Merc can proc it. By default, the discharge would be around the Merc, but if you wear the ring Astral Projector, the discharge would go wherever the enemies are. With this basic setup, it does just work. Now, I have no idea what the best Merc is, or the best way to proc, nor the best setup, and I'm sure it can be found with more testing. The only requirements are a Merc that can use a wand and a shield and can personally hit. I'm also unsure if Link Mastery and Grandstanding stack. Sometimes it looks like they do, and sometimes not. Grandstanding has a range that is much smaller than Merc's tether, so that could be the issue, but it can also steal charges from enemies, as well as steal non-standard charges. Void Fletcher builds use this concept to steal void charges from Blink and Mirror Arrow clones. This would also work with a Merc using Blink and Mirror Arrow with a Void Fletcher equipped. Something to think about. Anyway, next build is more Luminary stuff, but it's not discharge.